Hello viewers, well, Need for Speed Unbound is released for those with early access today, and I've literally just got my hands on it in the past few hours. I've been playing the PlayStation 5 version, just a very brief hands-on, but I thought I'd just give you some feedback, get some content up on the channel on it so you guys know what it's all about. Need for Speed, just to go back a little bit of history, is a game that has many styles, from the Road and Track Presents original, which was more of a simulator. I quite like the whole attitude of the guy in the original 3DO version, to a bit more arcade style on the PlayStation, and then it really changed with Need for Speed 2, which I thought was dreadful. Need for Speed 3, back on track, and then we went through all different types: Need for Speed Porsche, Need for Speed Shift. I won't show all of those here. Different types of Need for Speed games. I suppose the one that stands out for me is, obviously I like the original, both on 3DO and PlayStation, but I also like Need for Speed Most Wanted on the Xbox 360 as a launch title. The game was rough around the edges, it was shoddy frame rate, lots of elements that were very unpolished, typical of EA, just kicking the game out the door before it's finished. But either way, there was a fun game in there, and it had some atmosphere to it that made it feel like you were part of this world. You felt engaged, you felt part of it, you felt involved. Really important to get that feeling. So when you're going to make a story, it's got to create that sort of involvement for you. So fast forward then, obviously Need for Speed has been through a whole journey in that time. I would say Hot Pursuit was probably one that stood out as being pretty good. I even like the Run the first time you play it. I thought that was a bit of fun for what it was. And the last few years, obviously, we've had Need for Speed in 2015, which had nice visuals, and in many respects I'll come back to that, and of course Need for Speed Heat, and now Need for Speed Unbound. I'm not going to go through all of them, there's just too many of them now. So Need for Speed Unbound then, let's have a quick look at this, and then we'll reflect. The reason why I've mentioned all of those is we'll reflect a little bit on them. I didn't mention Underground, we'll come back to that in a minute, or as we go through the different aspects. Firstly, set your game up. There is an aspect there where you can have spoken word for the options on the screen. Yeah, I am aware that it's an accessibility option. It's important to have accessibility options, but you're going to want to turn that straight off. Otherwise, you're going to hear this.
Press the cross button to continue. Press the cross button to continue. Press the cross button to continue. Press the cross button to continue.
In fact, it was so irritating, I had to just take my headphones off for a minute so I could get to the options to get rid of that. Depending on your style of music, they've gone for a particular style of music in this game. It's not for me. I had to turn that off. It's just not for me. We're a family-friendly channel, viewers. We're a family-friendly channel. Not for me. So unfortunately, a big part of the style of the game will be in the music. That, you know, cheerio to that. The next part is you choosing your character. Quite interesting, the character selection screens. Firstly, we've got the cell shading, and I thought that EA were going to go full in with the cell shading. I was hoping we would end up with something completely different. I guess an Auto Modelista, real anime style. I did some videos myself with an anime character earlier this year, an anime VTuber avatar style, and I was kind of hoping it was going to be something like that. It was going to be a real anime cartoon, you know, midnight mountain racers in Tokyo, you know, speed lines, all kinds of stuff that made you feel like you were part of this anime cartoon. But in actual fact, you'll find that the anime elements are a little bit limited in terms of how they've been applied, you know, around the edges. We'll get back to that, but let's look at these characters for a second. Well, none of them smile, none of them are very happy. They're all a little bit edgy, they're all a little bit moody. None of them are particular people that I'd necessarily want to associate with. There's a guy here, the guy with a beard. I just remember looking at his eyes and thinking, God, he looks like an angry guy. He's got killer eyes. Now, you can change the facial aspects on your various characters. It's quite limited in terms of what you can do. None of them seem particularly nice or friendly or relatable in any way. None of them in the car culture area would I want anything to do with. I'd look at them and say, no, I'm having nothing to do with you. So in terms of character design, you also can't change it. You've got blue hair, green hair, limited hair colors there as well. No, you can't actually change the color of the hair, something I noticed, but we did go through the fashion. I just toned it down a bit. Let's just wear something dark and crack on. So you've got your characters that for me aren't necessarily likable or relatable. You're going to go into the game. I guess when I got into the game, I thought, oh wow, look at that nice little effect for the, you pick your car, and you get stuck in. And I noticed the effect for the smoke when you're drifting. Ooh, that's a really nice little effect. So there's a little bit of animation for that, and I really like that effect. It's almost like the whole game's been sold on that effect, really, because outside of that, I can't help but feel like I'm playing Need for Speed Heat with a reskin once I get stuck in there. And then you have the characters themselves as well. It's funny, I feel like I'm listening to dialogue from Breaking Bad. The word yo and other stuff seems to come in. Hey yo, driving my car fast, yo. It feels like a tried and tested storyline where you're going underground with the underground gangs and their illegal street racing. It just feels like it's the same thing already. I feel like I've done this before. Drive here, get some money, build your car, add parts to it. The only problem for me is that the driving for me isn't necessarily that rewarding. You see, for me, you could say every driving game is that to an extent, but what makes a driving game worth it for me is how rewarding it is to drive. Do I feel like I'm becoming a better driver? It's funny, when I played the original Need for Speed, I felt there was a lot more original Need for Speed. Let's think of Most Wanted, shall we? There was a bit more control to the car. The player had to bring a bit more to it, and essentially you became a cab driver for learning that region. Understanding the location was really important. I don't know, I just felt a lot more involved as a driver and a lot more involved in the story and connection. I think here you get to know the two characters that you're with, and then you're immediately thrust into this journey with all these other oddball characters that are all very edgy. And I suppose for me, from a car culture perspective, when you're in when you look at car ownership clubs, there's always the edgy gossip in the crowd. There's always a gossip somewhere, isn't there? Somebody likes to cause some hassle now and again, which is a bit of a pain. But when you get into the real, from a racing perspective and performance modding, that's very different to just car modding and making your exhaust loud. The performance guys are a different thing entirely. So you kind of mix up two things once you're talking about performance, and I think that it's a little bit strange, yo, but at least we've got really good mechanics, yo, that know detailed engineering, yo, and that's all you need to know. So we'll crack on with that. Going into the game, again, the races are so far pretty straightforward in what I've played. Let's take a look at the modifications, the artistic aspects to it as well. So as you progress through the game, obviously you'll want to deck out your car, your ride, yo, and you'll want to paint it. So a lot of the paint options that you see in other games are there. I don't necessarily feel it's as intuitive in terms of the painting layout as, say, Gran Turismo. There were some elements to moving. It's a different language essentially in terms of moving your parts. You can build what you want to build and add the decals you want to add on there. It's just, for me, it would take a long time because it's a different method of input. So it's a very slow process. And then I thought, well, I haven't really got the time to do all this right now. Something maybe I'll come back to later. Probably not. But making your ride look amazing, taking cool photographs of it with nice smoke is going to be, a nice aspect to Need for Speed, and the car culture community will enjoy that. So lots in there. I went through all the decals. There's lots of branding. There's lots of logos, much like the fashion elements with your character. There's loads of different elements in there you can add to your characters, add to your cars, make the identity. I can't say make the identity your own, because you probably can with a car, but with the characters you are stuck with whatever characters they have available. So I wouldn't say I necessarily would add my own identity. I think I was playing it and thinking, would I want my Team VVV to feature in this particular world of Need for Speed? Not really. I don't think it's a very cool bunch of people. I think it's all, I don't know, really, just a bit of an oddball bunch, and I'd probably go off somewhere else and find some real performance people to race with instead, you know. Anyway, so we get into the racing, and of course, like any Need for Speed, race here, earn a bit of money, beat a few people, get a bit of kudos, dodge a few cops, race there, engage the storyline, get deeper unbounded underground, and find yourself in more and more trouble, and then having to tell your boss man that you're really sorry and that you've got yourself into a bit of a mess. So it's the story, everything, sort of the layout of it really is pretty basic. The handling, obviously I've just been using the one car so far. Brake deep into corners, a little bit of control through the throttle. Not necessarily as easy to control with a PlayStation controller as I would like. You've really got to feather the throttle through the corners. Track knowledge helps a lot just with maximising your drift through the corners. And as I say, testing different cars will be key. As far as I'm aware, the steering wheel isn't compatible. Obviously there's no cockpit cam as well. And for me, these are critical elements of a driving game that make the driving rewarding. But Need for Speed has a tremendous fan base to it. And whenever they play a game like this, they always sort of hark back to Need for Speed Underground as being this great game. I played a lot of Need for Speed Underground at the time, and even more Underground 2. I know people like the soundtrack. I couldn't stand the soundtrack in Need for Speed Underground 2. But either way, played a lot of it at the time, and again, it wasn't for me. The first game was very flashy, and it really had this new graphical night style, and it captured the Fast and the Furious vibe. The second game was the right place at the right time for a lot of people, but for me, I felt like I'd done it all before. There was online elements in the second one, but it was a bit broken online as well, so you could cheat online all you wanted to, and I suppose from my perspective, that was a bit disappointing, and so I don't necessarily hold it in the same high esteem a lot of other people do. Need for Speed then, it's funny, isn't it? When you're looking at this, are you saying it is the game for me, or you're just not a Need for Speed fan? I'm a huge Need for Speed fan. I'm just not a fan of this type of Need for Speed, and I think that's where you need a storyline that involves people. You need a storyline that feels like it works, feels logical, and I think that if you don't, you just end up with this sort of mismatch of artistic ideas that are being put together and it being sold hard to everybody as being something that recaptures that Need for Speed Underground. Because let's face it, a lot of people out there, you just tell them, hey, this is like Need for Speed Underground, this recaptures your youth, and they'll be all over it. So there you have it. Doesn't matter what I say. If you enjoy Need for Speed Heat a lot, you're probably going to enjoy this a lot, and I will play it a bit more. But to be quite honest, after just a short amount of time on it, I got a huge deja vu and felt bored as could possibly be. I just had to grind to make the video, but let's see where we go. That's it so far. It's not a proper review. I'll come back and slam dunk the rest of it later, but that's it for now. I'll leave you to a bit of gameplay, and there'll be more from me very soon.
Next time you lose it, I'm taking advantage. So long, loser.
That was nothing.
I will not lose.
We got cops on our tail.
Can you hold your nerve?
Ty, a couple scratches ain't gonna hurt.
They keep clipping traffic.